Welcome to Middle East Briefing. The content of the briefing includes Qatar's balancing act in Gaza. German Foreign Minister Baerbock travels to Middle East on Sunday. As journalists die in Gaza, West worries about our press freedom. A widened Middle East war would be a disaster, but it can still be avoided. A Hamas leader is killed. What's the state of play in the Middle East? Qatar's balancing act in Gaza. Foreign affairs. The role of Qatar in the current conflict between Israel and Hamas has come under scrutiny. Qatar has been engaged in high-profile efforts to mediate a truce between Israel and Hamas, negotiate deals to free civilian hostages, and evacuate foreign nationals from Gaza. Qatar has managed to maintain relations with both Israel and Hamas, acting as a mediator between the two. However, Qatar's support for Hamas has also drawn criticism, and there are concerns about its influence on the group. Qatar's relationship with Hamas has been beneficial for the country, giving it influence and status in the Middle East. However, it also carries risks, as Qatar's backing of Islamist groups has led to tensions with other Arab states in the past. Qatar's connections with both Israel and Hamas have allowed it to play a unique role in the conflict, but it now faces a dilemma as Israel vows to eliminate Hamas. Israel cannot allow Qatar to continue supporting the group, but Qatar's connections with Hamas make it an important player in any future negotiations. The United States and Israel must proceed with caution as they lean on Qatar for assistance with Hamas. Qatar is a valuable ally for both countries and hosts thousands of U.S. troops. Washington and Israel should pressure Qatar to cut ties with Hamas and funnel any future assistance to the Palestinians through a revitalized Palestinian Authority. However, in the short term, they need Qatar to pressure Hamas into acceding to another hostage deal. The priority should be securing the release of more hostages, and any criticism or forceful action against Qatar should be done discreetly. Once the hostage issue is resolved, the international community should condition Qatar's involvement in post-war Gaza on a change in its policy toward Hamas. German Foreign Minister Baerbock travels to Middle East on Sunday. Yahoo! German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock is set to travel to the Middle East this weekend to discuss the crisis situation in the region. The dramatic situation in the Gaza Strip, the situation in the West Bank, and the Israeli-Lebanese border will be at the center of the talks. The trip is Baerbock's fourth to the region since the recent attacks by Hamas. She will meet with Israeli and Palestinian leaders, as well as the Foreign Minister of Egypt. As journalists die in Gaza, West worries about our press freedom. SCMP opinion. The West has a poor record on press freedom, yet it criticizes the lack of press freedom in Hong Kong, says the author. They mention the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi in Saudi Arabia in 2018, the assassination of journalist Shireen Abu Akleh by the Israeli military in the West Bank, and the killing of journalists by Israeli forces in Gaza. The author argues that Western governments have not responded adequately to the mass killing of journalists, and also mentions the persecution of Julian Assange. They conclude by saying that the West should be concerned about its own press freedom issues. A widened Middle East war would be a disaster, but it can still be avoided. CNN. The Middle East is on the brink of a full-scale war, with the US, Iran, Israel, and Hezbollah all involved in escalating violence. However, there is hope that a larger-scale conflict can be avoided due to the fact that it is not in the vital national interests of any of the major powers in the region. Israel, Iran, and Hezbollah are all walking up to the brink of war, but the economic, political, and military consequences of escalation may be so severe that they will back down. If a wider war were to erupt, the US and its allies would be at risk of being dragged in. Therefore, the Biden administration is desperate to avoid this scenario. The article concludes by stating that Iran may have more to gain from using its proxy groups to exert lower-level costs on Israel and the US than it would from plunging into a direct conflict. However, these calculations could change if Washington is unable to deter Israel from expanding the conflict. A Hamas leader is killed. What's the state of play in the Middle East? Al Jazeera. The article discusses the current state of the Middle East, which has been marked by violence and instability in the early months of 2024. The assassination of a top Hamas leader in Lebanon, twin blasts in Iran, and Israel's ongoing war on Gaza are among the key events that have contributed to the turbulence in the region. The article does not provide a detailed analysis of the situation but rather serves as an introduction to the topic. Iran's Raisi promises retaliation at funeral for victims of twin bombings. Al Jazeera. Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi has vowed to retaliate after twin bombings in the city of Kerman killed and injured many people attending a memorial for top General Qasem Soleimani. ISIL has claimed responsibility for the attacks. Raisi addressed mourners, stating that Iran's enemies will face the country's strength and capabilities, and that Iranian forces will decide when and where to take action. The United Nations, European Union, and several countries have condemned the bombings. The Iranian authorities are linking the attack to growing regional tensions during Israel's war in Gaza. Unauthorized settlement surges in occupied West Bank, advocacy group says. New York Times. According to a report by Peace Now, an Israeli advocacy group that opposes settlements, Jewish settlers in the occupied West Bank have carried out a surge of unauthorized moves to expand their footprint in the territory. The report states that the settlers have established 9 new so-called wildcat settlement outposts, not authorized by the Israeli government, as well as creating more than a dozen new dirt paths and roads. The settlers have also been fencing off open areas in order to block access to Palestinian herders. The report states that several of the outposts and roads are on privately owned Palestinian land, in violation of Israeli law. These activities are adding fuel to the already high tensions in the West Bank, where violence and Israeli military raids have been escalating over the past year. Most countries view all settlement construction in the West Bank and East Jerusalem as a violation of international law. Hezbollah leader Nasrallah weighs cost of escalating conflict with Israel. Financial Times. The recent killing of a senior Hamas leader in Beirut has raised the stakes for Hezbollah and its leader Hassan Nasrallah. Nasrallah has shown pragmatism in recent months, responding to Israeli attacks with a calibrated tit-for-tat response. However, the assassination of Salah al-Arauri, an ally of Nasrallah, in Lebanon has significantly raised the stakes and thrown into question whether Nasrallah's restraint will hold. Many anticipate that Hezbollah will respond quickly, but it will need to be a response that restores balance without escalating to all-out war. The next phase of the war will determine whether the conflict broadens into a full-blown regional conflagration. Israel, which has shown increasing belligerence towards Lebanon, has warned Hezbollah that it can do in Beirut what it has done in Gaza. Nasrallah has said that he does not want a war, but his group is ready to fight without limits if provoked. However, Nasrallah and Iran do not want to trigger a full-blown conflict. Nasrallah is viewed as the most important figure in the axis of resistance after Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Blinken heads to the Mideast again as fears of regional conflict surge. The Independent. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is visiting the Middle East for the 4th time since the Israel-Hamas war erupted in October. Blinken will be focusing on expanding humanitarian aid to Gaza, urging Israel to minimize civilian casualties, and discussing the release of hostages held by Hamas. However, recent attacks and assassinations in the Red Sea, Lebanon, Iran, and Iraq have increased concerns about a regional conflagration. Blinken will also address these recent developments, including a drone strike attributed to Israel that killed a senior Hamas leader in Beirut, explosions in Iran targeting a memorial service for a U.S. assassinated Revolutionary Guard commander, a drone attack on a pro-Iranian Iraqi militia group in Baghdad, and Houthi attacks on commercial shipping in the Red Sea. The U.S. is now focused on deterring attacks by the Iran-backed Houthis and has warned Iraqi militia groups that attacks on U.S. troops or bases will not be tolerated. McDonald's CEO said it's experiencing meaningful business impact across the Middle East. CNN. McDonald's has said that it is experiencing a meaningful business impact in the Middle East due to the war between Israel and Hamas. In a letter posted on LinkedIn, McDonald's CEO Chris Kempczynski stated that several markets across the Middle East are experiencing a meaningful business impact due to the war and associated misinformation affecting the fast food chain. His comments come after a McDonald's operator in Israel had been offering discounts to soldiers and security forces since an assault by Hamas militants in October. Franchise groups in Kuwait, Pakistan and other countries distanced themselves from the Israeli operator's actions and made donations to help those in Gaza. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Dr. Six, your resident observer from the 6 Degrees world. Today, we have covered a range of news stories from the Middle East, focusing on the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas, as well as the wider regional implications. Qatar's delicate balancing act, Germany's diplomatic efforts, press freedom concerns, the risk of a wider Middle East war, the assassination of a Hamas leader, unauthorized settlements in the West Bank, Hezbollah's response, Secretary of State Blinken's visit, and even the impact on McDonald's business in the region. Phew, that's quite a lot to cover. Now, let's dive into some analysis. Qatar has been playing a unique role as a mediator between Israel and Hamas, but its support for Hamas has drawn criticism. While Qatar's relationship with Hamas has given it influence in the Middle East, it also carries risks, as it has strained relations with other Arab states. The United States and Israel need to proceed with caution as they rely on Qatar for assistance with Hamas. They should pressure Qatar to cut ties with Hamas in the long term, but for now, the priority should be securing the release of more hostages. German Foreign Minister Baerbock's visit to the Middle East shows the international community's concern about the crisis. The West's criticism of press freedom issues in Hong Kong is seen as hypocritical, given its own poor record. The risk of a wider Middle East war is present, but it is not in the vital national interests of the major powers involved to escalate the conflict to that extent. Iran may have more to gain from using proxy groups rather than engaging in a direct conflict. However, recent events, such as the assassination of a top Hamas leader and the bombings in Iran, have raised concerns about a regional conflagration. The unauthorized settlements in the West Bank are adding fuel to the already high tensions in the region and are viewed as a violation of international law. Hezbollah's response to the killing of its ally in Lebanon will be crucial in determining whether the conflict escalates further. Secretary of State Blinken's visit to the Middle East focuses on humanitarian aid, urging Israel to minimize civilian casualties, and discussing hostage releases, but recent attacks and assassinations have increased concerns about a wider conflict. And finally, even McDonald's has felt the impact of the war in the Middle East, with several markets experiencing a meaningful business impact. So, there you have it, a whirlwind tour of the latest news from the Middle East. It's a complex and volatile region, with many different actors and interests at play. As always, I encourage you, my dear audience, to share your thoughts and ideas. What are your views on Qatar's role in the conflict? How can press freedom be improved in the West? And what steps can be taken to prevent a wider Middle East war? I look forward to hearing your perspectives and engaging in a lively discussion. Until next time, stay curious and stay connected in the 6 Degrees world. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.